tonight, reactions trail ministerial lists of Nigerians as Nigerians question some of the appointments of the president. Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele appears in court on 20 new charges bordering on procurement fraud. Welcome everyone to Politics Today. I'm Terry Ikumi. The embattled Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele was at the FCT High Court today following his arraignment on 20 new charges bordering on procurement fraud. The arraignment was, however, stalled due to the absence of the first and second defendants who were set to be indisposed. Following an application for adjournment, the presiding judge, Justice Hamza Muazu, adjourned the matter to the 23rd of August 2023. Godwin Emefiele and his associates are being arraigned by the federal government for an alleged 6.9 billion naira procurement fraud. Mr. Emefiele will be arraigned alongside a female CBN employee, Saadatu Yaro, and her company, April 1616 Investment Limited, on 20 charges of procurement fraud, conspiracy, and conferring corrupt advantages on his associates. The suspended CBN governor, who had been in detention since he was suspended from office on June 9, was accused of conferring corrupt advantages on Yaro, a director in April 1616 Investment Limited. Now, the federal government has approved 5 billion naira for each state to enable them procure food items for distribution to the poor in their respective states. Governor Babagana Zulum of Borno State disclosed this at the presidential villa shortly after the National Economic Council meeting chaired by the vice president. It says the federal government also released 5 trucks of rice each to the 36 state governors, and that the governors are to procure 100,000 bags of rice as well as 40,000 bags of maize and fertilizers. 52% of the funds, according to Governor Zulum, is given to the state governments as grants, while 48% is loan to be repaid.
In order to cushion the effect of the subsidy removal, the federal government of Nigeria has released 5 trucks of rice to each state last week. Furthermore, in order to cushion the effect of food shortages across the country, the federal government has approved the sum of 5 billion naira to be given to each state for the procurement of 100,000 bags of rice, 100,000 bags of rice, 40,000 bags of maize, and fertilizers. This funding has to be shared with a formula as follows. 52% of this money is given to states as grants, while 48% of the 5 billion naira is to be paid back on an installment basis within a period of 2 years, 20 months to the CBN by the states and the local government areas in Nigeria.
Now, the National Economic Council also set up a committee headed by the Anambra State Governor, Professor Charles Soludo, tasked with the responsibility of engaging with the leadership of the Nigeria Labour Congress. Governor Ubasani of Kaduna State further disclosed that the sum of 2 billion naira has so far been released to each of the state governors. For more, let's turn to our political roundup.
The Nigeria Governors Forum held an emergency security meeting with the National Security Advisor. The meeting, which is held behind closed doors at the Forum's secretariat in Abuja, also had in attendance the Special Advisor to the President on Health, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture, and officials of the World Bank. At the end of the 7-hour meeting, the chairman of the forum, Governor Abdurrahman Abdulrazak of Kwara State, told journalists that the meeting is to strengthen security communications between the state and the Office of the National Security Advisor.
Governors also urged that henceforth, most of the programs hitherto being done by CBN should be transferred to the Ministry of Agriculture, because under the previous administration, there are some overlapping programs.
Governor Bassey Otu of Cross River State has sworn in 31 commissioners as members of the State Executive Council. Speaking at the ceremony in Calabar, Governor Otu charged the new commissioners to deliver on their duties with a sense of responsibility, diligence, accountability, and commitment to move the state to the next level.
As you are going to offices, definitely you have challenges, you have criticisms, but you must not be distracted, provided you're doing what is right.
In Taraba State, Governor Agbu Kefes has inaugurated a palliative care committee to implement the government's welfare blueprint for citizens to alleviate the difficulties caused by the removal of fuel subsidy. Speaking at the inauguration ceremony in Jalingo, the state capital, the governor says it is important for the state government to extend care to the people in the face of the economic hardship.
This administration has found you worthy to entrust this responsibility in your care.
Governor Godwin Obaseki of Edo State has shown appreciation to the Nigerian Army for its role in keeping the state secured, particularly in the area of providing manpower training for the state-owned security outfit. Mr. Obaseki gave the appreciation when he received the General Officer commanding the 2 Division, Nigerian Army, Major General Valentine Okoro, on a courtesy visit at the Government House in Benin City, the Edo State capital.
This is to just say we are just truly, very, very appreciative of what the Nigerian Army is doing for us in Edo State in terms of supporting security efforts.
The candidate of the Action Alliance for Bende Federal Constituency in Abia State, Mr. Ifeanyi Bokwe, has denied filing petitions against the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Ben Kalu, who emerged as the winner of the constituency during the 2023 National Assembly elections. Speaking to Channels Television in Umuahia, the Abia State capital, Mr. Bokwe says he did not file any petition at the tribunal.
That such thing is going on in this country, and you are at home, you don't even know that somebody is using your name already to remove Honorable Ben Carlo, to cancel the election. That is not, I don't even know anything about it.
Now, the Director of Defense Media Operations, Major General Edward Buba, has given the breakdown of casualties in the ambush of troops in Niger State and evacuation helicopter crash. According to him, a total of 36 officers were killed in total for the ambush. 3 officers, 2 soldiers, and 7 wounded in the helicopter crash. 14 of the previously killed, the 7 previously wounded, 2 pilots, and 2 crew members. And according to Major General Edward Buba, an investigation is still underway to determine the cause of the crash, and he urges citizens to be wary of propaganda by terrorists and remain patriotic. Well, let's go away from that and head to our discussion now. Reactions have trailed the ministerial lists by the president. I've been joined virtually by Mr. Daniel Buala, who is a lawyer and former spokesperson of the Atiku Presidential Campaign Council, and also Senator representing Oyo Central, Senator Yunus Akintunde. They are joining us virtually. And in the studio, I have Hamzat Lawal, CEO of Connected Development, very concerned about improving governance. Gentlemen, welcome to Politics Today, I beg your pardon. I'd like to start the conversation with Senator Yunus, considering that you were part of the team that screened the senators. What's your reaction? Let me get your general thoughts, considering the reactions that have trailed the announcements and concerns about political compensation associated with the list.
Thank you very much. I think from the initial stage, the president made it clear to Nigeria that politics has ended, and we are out to set up a federal executive cabinet that will be representative enough, that are of men of reputable character, people that can deliver for Nigeria. And if we are sincere with ourselves, as of today, what Nigeria needs are people that can perform, that can deliver, that can give us what the president is looking out for. You know, our president is an achiever. He's someone that is focused. He knows what he wants. And I wouldn't mind if I'm in his position to source for whoever I believe can deliver. Thinking that is political, is compensation for politicians shouldn't be the game. As of today, with due respect to whoever wants to prove me wrong, look at the Attorney General designate. That is Barrister Fagbemi. I don't think anybody can question him when it comes to legal issue. During his training, More than 7 senior advocates of Nigeria followed him to the chamber. If anybody can contest that, I'm still looking up to that. And you can see people like the Minister of State for Petroleum, Enikis Kolobiri. He has served as Minister of State in Agric before, and we all knew he delivered. So if you are bringing in people that you are very sure can deliver, what are you saying? We have instances during the screening when even people from the opposing camp, look at the case of Osun State. People from PDP came up and said they are satisfied with the nominee who happens to even be an APC member. I think we should grow beyond party inclination. We should grow beyond religious inclination. What we should be concerned of is deliverables. And I believe without sentiment that Nigeria are comfortable with the list we have now.
Mr. Daniel Bwala, you've listened to Senator Yunus, and he says that we've gone beyond the issue of politics now, and it's more about governance. I know that you have some reservations about certain people on that list, but let me throw the question open to you as a base to the conversation. Are you also in agreement with Senator Yunus that this list is more about competence than political compensation?
It is difficult to agree in total with him, but I can agree with him on, for example, the learned senior advocate that he mentioned. This is somebody I have known. He has a stellar career in legal practice, has not been involved in politics. He has achieved so much in the legal practice, and giving him that role as Attorney General would only place a greater burden for him to discharge this responsibility, knowing his history, knowing his character, knowing his legacy, so much so that he will concentrate on administering on the office rather than on politics. I agree with that. I also agree with people like Wale Odun, who has a history, who has a good record. Everyone believes that he's an economist that's coming in with a resume. I agree with Professor Tahir Mamman, who was my teacher, who is made Minister of Education, stellar record as a legal practitioner, headed Dean Faculty, headed the law school, and then went on to become Vice Chancellor of a university. So as Minister of Education, he will do well. However, I have reservation on so many, and that is why, if you permit me, I will caption my reaction as square peg in round holes and the challenge of a renewed hope. And I will give you an example. For example, there are people who are not in the first place, in my view, competent enough to be in the list. And there are people who are in the list, they are competent and compellable. However, the positions they are assigned to is like a mismatch. I can just rush them and give you. Hanatu, for example, is made the Minister for Culture, while her counterpart, Betty, is made Minister of Humanitarian. You have a president who believes that he needs to invade Niger. Probably he has planned to be able to extend that to Mali and Burkina Faso. In other words, the president, as the chair of ECOWAS, is committed to a fight around that. So there would certainly going to be humanitarian crisis around the border. And that is exactly where she comes from. She's very familiar with humanitarian issues. She would have perfectly fit into the office as humanitarian minister, while Betty, coming from Cross River, that's rich in culture, remember every year they used to have this cultural program, she would have done that well. Secondly, this Minister of State for Defense was a former governor who all through the 4 years of managing the state, he has his approval rating in fighting insecurity is 5/100. And now you made him Minister of State to administer what? Then you also put on top of him substantive minister for the defense, somebody coming from the same geopolitical zone. It is not strategic for Asuwaju to put both substantive minister of defense and the Minister of State for Defense from the same geopolitical zone. I give you another example. The Minister of FCT and then the indigene of FCT who is made the Minister of Special Duty. When he was nominated as a minister, everybody was in the FCT were clapping their hands saying that Asuwaju is bringing innovation by making an indigene minister. That's what they had in their mind. But at the end of the day, he's moved to special duty. And then Wike, who would have done better as in special duty, is made FCT minister. And the man who would have been FCT minister is made of special duty.
Mr. Bwala, clearly you have concerns about which peg goes into which hole. But we will come to that, especially because the concerns around security are germane and people need to hear about that. And there are those who have excelled in certain areas that some believe should have been in other areas. But we will come to the details of that. But let me bring Hamzat Lawal here. Hamzat is very particular about the improvement of governance. And having listened to both men, your neutrality in this case is very important. What are your thoughts with regard to balancing constitutional requirements per state and the quality of the individuals based on the list that's been presented forward?
Well, again, I think that as much as we say now we have to focus on governance, but what you need is fine politics, fine policy, and then you get good governance. And the president must always play politics. He must also always compensate people who have worked cleanly for his success, which is understandable. But for me, when I look at the list and when I listen to the senator particularly, I don't think he's in tune with the realities of what people are saying, particularly, at the grassroots and on the street across the country, reacting from this list. But when you look at people who have emerged, and for me, I'm excited about the Minister of Foreign Affairs, for instance, a fine ambassador who has exceptional career, and I believe that he would drive that ministry. When you look at the Ministry of Health, I'm really excited about the fact that he was given that portfolio. Now, when you look at my own constituent, I'm not a youth, but I'm a young person. But so my constituent is the Ministry of Youth. So when you look at the person who have been given that ministry, he's not young. I thought Mr. President would be fair to one of the constituents that informed and contributed to the outcome of the 2023 general election. So again, we're going back to where we're coming from, where young people are not playing, or youth are not playing their role in governance, and particularly in the Federal Executive Council. Maybe he would make amends, but time will tell. But you see, Terry, when I look at the ministerial list, it doesn't give hope. It doesn't give confidence. Yes, there are some people that would do a fine job. But you see, the Federal Executive Council is the apex executive body that takes key decisions that affect everyday Nigerian and people at the grassroots. And this is a true representative of Nigeria as it is. It doesn't really depict confidence. It doesn't really showcase that Mr. President thought through before he assigned those portfolio, even before he sent those lists to the National Assembly. Not to even talk about some embarrassment that happened during the screening, but I think that it's a time to really reflect. And I think this is a time for Nigerians to charge up and hold them to account as they take hold of office.
But the question I asked is balancing constitutional requirements per state and the quality of the individuals. How do we balance that?
Well, how we balance it for me is, yes, the Constitution is clear. Every state must be represented at the Federal Executive Council. And then when you also look at requirement, come on. Are we saying these are the best 10 from every state that we have currently? And when I say these, not all the people, that have been designated as minister. Are we saying some of those people are the best from their state?
Let me go to Senator Yunus Akintunde now. You've listened to Mr. Boala and Hamzat. Hamzat actually believes that you're not in tune with the current realities with regard to how people perceive this list. And it raises a question, considering the concerns of square pegs and round holes as alleged and raised. It raises the question now, what does this take from the screening of the Senate with regard to the process being carried out without portfolios attached? When you look at this list now, do you look back and say it would have been easier for you as a Senate if portfolios were attached?
Let me first correct him. I'm one of the few people that has good connect with my constituent. I'm in my constituency as I'm talking to you. So if anybody is saying I'm not in touch, that person might not be too correct. I won an election as a senator, and I have contact with virtually everybody. So I represent some people there. Two people have spoken now, and they have told the nation that they are satisfied with 9 of the nominees. 2 of them, sum them together. 2 out of over 200 million people, and they are satisfied with 9. I want us to know that spectators are the best players. it's good to sit down and be analyzing on paper. The man what's the purpose and what's the responsibility of a minister, a mere political head of the ministry. The government has its own policy and program. The party has its own policies and program. Let me take myself as an example. I was Commissioner for Works and Transport in my state. I was never an engineer. And I did well. I'm not assessing myself to the extent that the Nigerian Society of Engineers gave me an award of meritorious service. So it doesn't matter that you have to be an engineer to be in works. You doesn't have to be someone from medical field to be in health. There could be one or two instances where professionals who be expected to serve there. So that wrong paid, wrong goes. The best assessor of cabinet is the man that appointed them. Is the one to assess them you've performed well. Look, Dr. Muyiwa Gbadegeshin was never a medical doctor, and he's not a medical doctor. He served as commissioner for health in Oyo State, and he did well. So the people saying they put wrong ped, they put wrong goal, are we saying that's the best 10? Do they conduct any exam for anybody? It needs to convince me of the best 10 from any of the states. It's not only when you conduct exam that you pick your own best 10. The president is the head of this government, and ministers are mere representatives of the president in their ministries. You have to know that the accounting officers are the permanent secretaries, and those are the people to drive the agenda of the ministry itself. So if the president sat down with 2, 3, 4, 5 people to prepare his own list, and we are assessing him in less than 24 hours, I think we are too much in a hurry. And that's what anybody says outside. Look, as an ordinary, as a senator-elect, for me to pick people to work with me, I know people have been complaining. Oh, they asked him to pick 2, 3 legislative aides. I have not been considered. I have not been picked to.
Okay, I think we have a problem with that conversation. I'll just go to Senator Boala. Mr. Boala, I beg your pardon. Senator Yunus believes that it's not a perfect document and adjustments could be made where necessary. But I'd like for us to pick out some of these positions and look at them holistically, specifically security. And security because the president on his inauguration day had said he would prioritize security. In assuming office, he made some adjustments. He retired the security chiefs and appointed new ones, and appointed a national security advisor as well. When you look at the person in charge of security, you have former Governor Muhammad Badaru as the Chief of Defense, Minister of Defense, and then you have Minister of State for Defense, former Governor Bello Matawale. It takes me back to something I saw from Senator Shehu Sani, who said that core politicians in that position will not do the job. Do you agree with that?
You see, let me say this. I agree in part that somebody does not have to be, let's say, for example, an expert in security before you can make him Minister of Defense. It doesn't have to follow. In the United States of America, when Condi Rice was made National Security Advisor, she was merely a professor and teaching in the university. However, her background qualified for that role. Now, you have made, apart from the goof, in my view, that you are putting 2 ministers, substantive and state, both from the same geopolitical zone, which I believe that is a strategic goof. But in terms of the resume of the persons, Governor Matawale as Minister of State for Defense, there has to be a reason why Asiwaju decided on him, probably looking at his trajectory or history, because Asiwaju himself as the president has run on this thing that he did something in Lagos and will replicate. In other words, he is saying that apart from him, any other person that is appointed by him should be judged on the basis of their past record. Matawale has not dealt with insecurity, whether from the point of view of coordinating and cooperating with security forces, or even in the non-kinetic approach of negotiation with the bandit. It was an utter failure. Now you're taking Badaru, who does not have, in my view, a resume that relates to security. The question many people are asking is, does the president have a particular problem with retired army generals or retired security chiefs? We have just heard about a lot of people who were retired that never, put to practice their experience and their knowledge. what we are confronted with in terms of insecurity in Nigeria is hydra-headed. You have insurgency, you have local banditry, we have criminal element, you have armed robbery. These diverse operations of insecurity.
Staff now, and they are not the service chiefs.
Sorry?
Let's go ahead, Mr. Bola.
Yeah. So when you look at the hydra-headed nature of the insecurity confronting us as a nation, you cannot afford to appoint as minister somebody who does not have either a background or experience. Now, when Matawali or even Badaru sits with these service chiefs to discuss matters of security, from what angle is he going to come? He may not even appreciate some of the things they are going to dissect for him for the purposes of taking it onward to the president. Now, somebody made an argument and said every governor was chief executive officer, therefore any governor can be a minister of defense. Absurdity. We have seen governors that have failed security-wise. And that's the point with respect to insecurity. The president ought to have assigned, and he has the rich catalog of people, even from among the nominated people, not to talk of those ones that could have been appointed, to man that office so we can know that the president is in fact serious about fighting insecurity. You bring a politician no history and no experience in security, you cannot expect a mighty thing.
Mr. Bola, I don't think that Senator Yunus agrees with you, because I think I heard him mention something about them not being chiefs of service chiefs. So I'd go to Senator Yunus to hear his counter position on what you've just said with regard to either politicizing or otherwise that position. Senator Yunus, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm still saying this. Previously, former Governor Kwankwaso served as Minister of Defense in Nigeria. He was never a military personnel. And I'm telling you, we have the Chief of Army Staff, we have the Chief of Air Staff, we have the Chief of Naval Staff. All the service chiefs are there. The Chief of Defense Staff is there. The commandants are there. Ministers are the political head of the ministries. They are not even the accounting officers. And we cannot tell me that all the permanent secretaries that have been serving the Federal Ministry of Defense have military background. The issue of having security crisis in Nigeria has nothing to do forever in respect of whoever serves as Minister of Defense. I think it's much more of the service chiefs issue.
Okay.
They are the one to handle security issues.
Very well then.
Those people elected now, they are political head of the ministry. And I've said, I think it's unfair to start assessing a government that has not taken off. The man campaign and the nation. When we are saying now, we say this government of Bola Tinubu, let's give him a chance. He has done it in Lagos before, and the same way he sourced people, that people are criticizing him then, that he brought in people that are not from Lagos. They can manage Lagos, eventually manage Lagos successfully.
Senator,
I think we should allow him to serve, and we can then assess them. I think it's premature for anybody to be assessing this cabinet as of now. Thank you.
Very well then. Just before we go on the break, Hamza, he thinks that it's premature to assess the cabinet at this time. But with regard to security, which is a subtopic, do you agree?
Well, I want to believe that Senator Yunus is not speaking on behalf of the Senate, because if he is, then we're in trouble. Because why we're where we are today is because we've played politics with security. That's why we're dealing with insecurity. So we cannot afford to play politics with security. For me, what gives me confidence is the National Security Advisor and the new service chiefs. I would not want to speak about the designated ministers for the Ministry of Defense for now. But again, and congratulations to Senator Yunus for winning his election. Would he allow someone who did not go to aviation school to fly an aeroplane that he would be inside? Or would he allow someone to operate on him who is not a medical personnel? So let's not say that, oh, you know, they're just political head. Those are the people who the permanent secretaries would report to and the directors of this ministry. Those are the representatives of our own government. So we must take it serious, you know? And you can't say it's premature to criticize. No, it is not. Right. President Tinubu is there to serve the collective interests of Nigerians. And if we have any grievance, we must speak to those grievances.
Very well, then. Let's just go on a break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation. And it's still ahead on politics today, the conversation on the arraignment of the former CBN governor, Godwin Emefiele, will also come up. Please stay with us. Well, welcome back to Politics Today. The conversation is still on the ministerial list of the president and the reactions that have trailed that list. My guests are Senator Yunus Akintunde, who is a senator representing Oyo Central, and then Mr. Daniel Bwala is a lawyer and former spokesperson of the Atiku Presidential Campaign Organization. And Mr. Hamzat Lawal is the CEO of Connected Developments. Mr. Hamzat, let's talk quickly now with regards beyond the quality or otherwise of these individuals. There are concerns as to cutting down the cost of governance, and now we have 48 ministers, or 45 so far. And then you do recall that during the Buhari administration's first tenure, it cut down the number of ministers, all in a bid to cut down the cost of governance. That number was eventually increased in his second tenure, but now this is beyond what he did in his first and his second tenure. 45 ministers, 48 ministers. Is that too much? Does that suggest, or should Nigerians be concerned about the resolve or otherwise of this administration to cut down the cost of governance?
Oh, yes, there are concerns that the leadership of the country must lead by example. Today we're dealing with inflation, we're dealing with the removal of subsidy, and there's hardship in the land, and that's why the government has announced that 5 billion has been distributed per state, and this is the money we would follow. So yes, the president must show example and must communicate clearly to the Nigerian people how he's intending to cut the cost of governance, even if he wants to keep the 45 or 48 ministers. But it must be clear, and we must see this savings, or we must see how he has successfully cut the cost, of these people running the affairs of government on his behalf. Yes, I know that we're at a critical time, and we need all hands on deck, and we need the president to engage the right people to lead his government, the vision of his government, and the renewed hope agenda and various policy. But it's also important as we do this, we must be very sensitive about how much this will cost the Nigerian people and how the government or how the president is putting in place priority spending for what is currently needed. So for me, it's important that Mr. President lead, and he leads clearly and communicate to the Nigerian people.
So 48 ministers, not too much?
Again, right now, we need people who would drive the affairs of the country, and so we can bounce back. Terry, we're dealing with inflation. We're dealing with removal of subsidy, There's a lot of gap in governance right now. And for me, as long as the president, again, leads with example, showing how he's cutting the cost of... Again, and to be fair, I know that during the previous administration, ministers came public and said their salary is 750,000 naira. So when we want to look at cutting the cost of governance, it has to be not only the executive arm, also the legislative arm. And when we also look at the budget, we need to do away with frivolous line item. And maybe we also debate how many fleets of aircraft does the president actually need to function appropriately. So again, all this recurrent expenditure.
Well, speaking of the legislative arm, let me go to Senator Yunus, because I know that when the conversation of the salaries of lawmakers come up, they always point to the ministers to say that they collect the bulk of the money and they are not elected and don't really need that much money considering the number of vehicles in their convoy and more and stuff. So, Senator Yunus, with regard to cutting down the cost of governance, does 45 or 48 ministers sound okay to you? Are you satisfied with that figure?
Thank you, sir. Let me first appreciate the last speaker that he could now agree with me that it might be too early to criticize this government. I think in simple economics, what will be the cumulative cost of running 48 ministers? You can run 10 ministers at a more expensive cost than 48. And I wish the president would take that into consideration. That's number one. Let me correct him as well, because we are on the television now. No director has the right to report to any minister. Directors do report to the permanent secretary. Whoever that has a little knowledge of governance, we know that directors doesn't report to ministers. They report to the permanent secretary. Now coming to the issue of 48 ministers, I've said it. I'm a student of accounting. It could be funny to you. I'm an energy person. I have my PhD on energy, but I'm still writing ICANN as well. It's the cumulative cost that is important. As I said earlier, you can have 10 ministers and the cost of running them could be more expensive than 48 ministers. But I will toe the line that it is time for government in general to run at the least minimum cost.
All right, Senator Yunus, with regard to...
Thank you very much.
All right, fair enough. Mr. Boala,
hello?
I can hear you, but I've moved on to Mr. Boala now. You've heard both men speak with regards to cutting down the cost of governance, and I'd like to get your take on what you think about the number of ministers. Is it a concern for you? And also recall that the Niger Delta Ministry no longer exists in this administration based on the list that's been put forward. Well, if that will change, no idea. But what are your thoughts on that?
No, but if you say Niger Delta no longer exists, they've also created other ministries. I know there is one, I think, Ministry of Moving Water and Blue Sea Economy.
Marina, you mean?
Pardon?
Marina.
Marine and Blue Sea Economy.
Marine and Blue Sea.
Okay, Marine and Blue Sea
Economy, so I beg your pardon.
It has, or they have also created new ministries. I don't want to, with the greatest respect, waste my energy to talk about the idea of cutting the cost of governance, because if you look at the constitution of the ministry and the ministers, you know there is nothing near conversation around cutting the cost of governance. Well, if you need to know, in America, as big as American government is, America consists of only 15 ministers and 9 SA, constituting the total of 25, I think, cabinet members, the greatest economy in the world. But if the president thinks that with this number of ministers, he still has the capacity to generate the revenue that will take care of that, I mean, so be it. It doesn't look so at the beginning. And I think that even conversation deepening in this regard will never produce any. In fact, I have heard that he still wants to appoint 3 more ministers. So I don't want to use the number of ministers as a yardstick for determining whether or not this administration is cutting the cost of governance. I would have rather wished that we critically look into these assigned roles for these ministers and whether they fit into that. And the senator has consistently been using the term that it is too early to judge, it is too early. Maybe the senator needs to know, under a democratic society, it consists of people in public office and the populace who consistently call their people in public office to account by expressing their views about the way governance is run. So whether we talk about it today or we talk about it 2 hours after it was released, it is not premature. We are not talking about now their performance in the ministry. We are assessing whether they are suitable for the role assigned to them. And what's the big thing in talking about that? Now, he also emphasized so much around the fact that he did not read, you see, to be a senator, you can read anything. The senator is just your representing public service. And to say that you don't need the position of the ministers is not relevant because you already have PAMSEC and directors. So why don't you also say the position of the president is not relevant? Because we have PAMSEC, we have all these institutions of the state in function. A political public office holder is called upon to use his experience, his character, and a good sense of judgment in administering.
All right, Mr. Bola.
And therefore, it's imperative that who will advise the president on the ministry? Who will dissect the policy of the president? The Section 5 says the president has the executive power. He exercises that by himself through the vice or ministers of the government of the federation. Why didn't he say PAMSEC and directors? If we are having conversation, in my view, sometimes when we try to intervene,
Mr. Bola,
let me come. I'm coming. I'm talking to Terry. Let me just land. When we express our views, sometimes people tend to think as if we're anti-government. Most of the people who are around Asiwaju, did they support him as much as I did?
Mr. Bola, let's focus on the issue. Let's just focus on the issue.
No, that's why.
Just a second. We agree that we... Mr. Bola, just a second. Mr. Bola, just a second. We're trying to go away from this conversation. We need to talk about the arraignment of the CBN governor. But I just want us to wrap up on this now with Hamza. There are 2 issues that still raise concern. One of them is representation and the other is inclusion. Representation specifically for the people of the FCT who believe that they should have an indigene represent them at the Federal Executive Council. And then there's the inclusion aspect with regard to youth and women. How do you...
Persons with disability.
So how do you assess this, the president based on this list? Quickly, please.
Well, he has not done well. When you look at particularly youth and persons with disability. For women, it's a bit encouraging. At least we have a few women that would inform the cabinet. But for youth representative, and when I say youth, I think I need to be clear, because the Nigerian youth policy says she recognizes youth as age 18 to 29, but the African Youth Charter say 18 to 35. So, okay, let's say Nigerian youth politics, 18 to 40, 45. So when you look at his cabinet, who amongst the people are below, well, I know some of the women are below 45, but then again, we don't have that reflection of the over 60 million people who, over 60% rather, over 200 million that represent the current population in the country, that demographic. We don't have that But again, when you look at persons with disability, 0 over 100.
Very well, then let's go to the issue of the embattled CBN governor now, who was in court today, even though the process stalled due to the absence of the witness. I'd like to go to Senator Yunus on this, to start off with you. And it's because the president in France had talked about a rotten financial system, and that the person who was responsible, the CBN governor, the former CBN governor, would have to pay for it, and the authorities would have to do their job. And then we'll see that play out with the change in charge from illegal possession of firearms to procurement fraud now. Do you think that these charges suggest that it is directed at ensuring that the rotten economy, or whoever is responsible for the rotten economy, is made to pay for it?
Well, thank you. That's ought to be the intention. But I've studied the issue very well, and I believe that before the Federal Ministry of Justice could go to court on this, they must have their facts. Notwithstanding, when we were doing the screening of the ministers, if you could remember, one of the nominees then was a former deputy governor of the CBN, and he raised some vital issue. It was a public thing then. He said at the CBN, there has never been a time that the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria have joint meeting with the governor and his deputies, the governor of the central bank and the deputy governors, which means whatever decision taken at the governance meeting, that is governor and the deputy governance meeting of the CBN, is only what the governor of the CBN conveyed to the president that the president will be aware of. And that in some cases, they used to have minority opinion. With last Friday report of the release of the audited report of the CBN, I'm very sure that the president must have been convinced beyond reasonable doubt that the financial institution, that is the CBN, needs to be refocused, needs to be re-examined, and needs to be rearranged completely. And I'm very sure that the president will take decisive steps towards that. It's not only prosecuting a former CBN governor because of procurement that has to do with it. There are some policies that have been taken, that funds, Nigerian funds, public funds were spent on and has no results. That's why I'm saying that the president must have studied the situation very well and see beyond the issue of prosecuting the governor at the court of law because of procurement alone. The CBN itself must be re-examined very well and reorganized. That's my opinion. I'm not the president, but I'm sure he's convinced of that.
Yeah, Mr. Bwala, you're a lawyer, and I'd like to get your thoughts on these new charges. And also take you to the statement by the counsel to Emefiele, who had said that the court should disregard the federal government for ignoring the initial court order committing him to the prison service until he perfects his bail condition.
Well, I have not read the new charges at all, so I'm not in a position to have to critique it or interrogate it. But with respect to a lawyer coming to the court and asking the court to disregard application or charges until they obey court order, it's natural with our practice of law. If there is an order of court, you will insist as a counsel from the other side that the order be obeyed before they go to the next issue. But the discretion lies with the court, and the court will do what they think is proper given the circumstance. I think the bigger picture is that Emefiele's prosecution is more political. than of the realities of the issue, because we have seen how he was initially taken to court on, we were told he was being investigated on A, and then it turns out that they charge him on B, and later they have to withdraw the B because they have C and all of that. So we have even the case of Bawa, who up till today, we don't even know his whereabouts. There is no word as to whether he's going to be prosecuted or he's going to be released. So these are political issues that I choose not to delve more into it and allow them to do what they have to do. Like, for example, the Naira policy. The Naira policy, people had money in bank. It's just that their problem is they couldn't access the bank. Currently, as we speak, the banks are open, but you can't even see the money. Anybody who is studying abroad this year, he's going to pay twice the money for the fees because the Naira jumped from 500 and something official rate given to people who are studying to 1,190 something for pounds. We haven't talked about that. We haven't talked about dollars. So the people being prosecuted who obviously have taken us into the abyss, economically speaking. And so that's why I don't want to talk about the politics around Emefiele.
All right, let me talk. Hamza, Mr. Boala believes that this is political. You've seen the charges, and you know the history of the case, considering the initial charge and then this one. Do you think that this is political? And also, what are your concerns about the disrespect for court order?
First, the rule of law must always prevail, and the executive must always respect. And that's why we have separation of power, and the executive must always respect the judicial arm of government. Emefiele's decision was political. To be fair, his decision on Naira, the Naira policy, the fiscal policies, were all political, sadly. And that's what has brought all of us to this mess. And Emefiele did not only offended the people in power, he offended over 200 million people. People died because of these policies and not being able to access their money for treatment. You know, we lost a lot of people, particularly even people at the grassroots. And that's why we're facing the current hardship we're facing. Well, be as it may, the government of the day must ensure the rule of law prevails. Bring forward charges. I think that the first mistake they did was the first charges that was brought forward. Everyone thought it was a mockery of the entire process. And when you actually read the audited report, if you find time and you read the report, you'll be much more angrier than you are right now. It means that under Emefiele's CBN, you know, he literally lied, you know, even to the previous president and all our foreign partners. So again, as much as he has done, you know, economic sabotage, we must ensure that the rule of law prevail, and he must also be granted fair hearing.
Well, what do you think about procurement fraud? How strong is it? I mean, like I said in the initial question, the president's concern is the economy. So charging him on procurement fraud, does that answer to the economic concerns that were raised with regard to how he handled the economy?
But when you look at even corruption, procurement is over 80% of corrupt practices. That's where corrupt people that occupy public office move monies. And that's how we sabotage our economy. So procurement corruption is big. And if the president actually want to fight corruption, you must actually tackle procurement corruption. And that's why we always say, publish everything from tender to, you know, giving out this contract and how they implement this contract. And that's why, we follow the money, and you have value for money initiative and various other initiatives. But procurement fraud is the biggest element in corruption when you do anti-corruption work.
All right, quickly, let me take closing statements from you gentlemen. With regard to all we've said here today, everything boils down to governance and improving the economy, considering the state of the economy, the security situation in the country. So, Senator Yunus, I'll go with you first. What are your thoughts so far? I know you say it's too early to assess the Tinubu administration, but it is what it is. What are your thoughts?
Well, I still believe where you sit determines what you see. I know some people that are already working on the economy of this country. You will know that the government has announced that the issue of revenue generation will be rearranged, reorganized, and refertilized. And when they are doing that, we know that they might need some executive approval the cabinet approval to take certain decisions. That's why I will say that once we have the cabinet now, taking some significant and great economic decisions might require the cabinet approval. So by the time we have the cabinet in place, I'm very sure that things will change. That is very sure. By then, we might have a substantive governor of the central bank. You have the minister in charge of economy. You have the minister in charge of finance, plus those people to reorganize the revenue. They've told us that very soon the issue of IRS will go, and we'll have Nigerian Revenue Service.
Okay.
Let's see how that works out. By 2, 3, 4 months' time, we'll be able to sit down and assess
very well, then,
the performances of this government very well.
Mr. Buala.
Yeah, I heard that the president, after 6 months, is going to assess the performance of the ministers, and those who do not perform well, he's going to sack them and replace them. Well, we wait to see. But in terms of the economy, whether at the moment the fundamentals are correct, the fundamentals are certainly not correct. Yesterday, the CBN lied to the Nigerian people because of the free fall of Naira. They said they are going to pounce on speculators. Instead of them to be honest with Nigerians to say the reason why there is a free flow is because the demand for FX at this moment is high. People are going to school, people are going on vacation, and then the remittances to Nigeria are done through unofficial platforms because there is no confidence in the regulators. So instead of them to be open about it, they are talking about pouncing on speculators. If the economy is functioning, and I make bold to say the fundamentals of our economy, they are nose-diving. And so the earlier we're able to arrest it, the better for the country.
All right, Hamza, quickly, please.
I have no doubt that Mr. President can actually do better and take Nigeria to greater heights. I have confidence in his leadership, but he must come with honesty, because today's society has lost trust, particularly in public office holders and public institutions. And the first thing he must do is work in rebuilding that trust. And in doing that, he must ensure that information timely are shared as at when due. So for me, I believe that for particularly my demography, we need jobs.
Very well then. Hamzat Lawal, CEO of Connected Development, thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry.
And thank you to my virtual guest, Senator Yunus Akin. Today is a senator representing Oyo Central. Thank you very much, Senator. And Mr. Daniel Buala, lawyer and former spokesperson to the Atiku Presidential Campaign Organization. Thank you very much for your time as well.
Thank you.
And that's Politics Today. Thanks for your time. I'm Terry Ikumi. See you tomorrow.